Imagine you had everything in your life: a perfect boyfriend, a great job, great friends, and then one day you have the worst fight with your boyfriend in the world, and you also find out that you've lost your job. Then someone from your past invites you to a beautiful tropical resort, an escape away from the problems that you're facing. Paradise. Imagine. Would you say no? Beautiful waters, still waters, scuba diving, drinks, companionship. For Robyn Gardner, this is exactly what happened the week before her disappearance. She had a terrible fight with her boyfriend. She lost her job as a dental hygienist, and she was invited to Baby Beach in Aruba with a man that she'd known for a few years, named Gary Giordani. So on July 31st, 2011, Robyn Gardner, then 35 years old, and her companion, then 50-year-old Gary Giordano, traveled to Aruba. 2 days later, on August 2nd, 2011, Robyn Gardner was reported missing and has not been seen or heard from ever since.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber, and today I have yet another missing person case to share with you guys to try and spread awareness, to try and keep the story alive. This did happen in 2011 in Aruba, which is crazy. And you might be thinking, well, obviously you've seen the title, so you know this is not about the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, who is still missing, and still we have no resolution to that story, that disappearance, and that's another tragedy that I probably will cover here on my channel soon. But this is actually the disappearance of another woman who was 35 years old at the time that went on vacation with her, different sources say different things, we'll call it her lover, because she did have a boyfriend at the time also, but this was her lover. And they went to Aruba on vacation. A couple days after they went, she went missing, and she has not been found or seen since. There are a lot of speculations as to what happened leading up to her disappearance. There's speculations of, obviously, there's pretty much only one suspect, but the man that went with her actually has been released, and we're going to get into all of the case details. So I am going to be talking about the mysterious disappearance of Robyn Gardner, who went missing on August 2nd, 2011 in Aruba. Like I said, Robyn Gardner was 35 years old at the time of her disappearance. She actually was traveling from Maryland, where she lived with her family, and I guess she had been going through kind of a tough situation. She had recently lost her job, and an opportunity came up with this man who she had some people say a tumultuous relationship. They say like they were hot and cold. They weren't together, but I guess they did have some sort of friendship together. Now I'm kind of assuming that they were probably buddies of sorts, if you know what I mean. So Robyn Gardner, who was 35 years old at the time of her disappearance, actually traveled to the Caribbean, to Aruba, with her male partner, who was 50 years old at the time, named Gary Giordano. They had met on a website, I believe it's called Adult Friend Finder. They were friends for a couple of years. According to her roommate, he had invited her to a trip before and she had declined, and that sort of made him aggressive, is what the roommate said. He wasn't very kind in the text messages. So when she found out that Robyn was actually going on vacation with this man, she did have some weary feelings about it.
Her roommate was this man, Gary Giordano, was he a big part of her life? Was he a boyfriend?
I wouldn't say he was a boyfriend. He definitely was a friend, and they've known each other for over a year now.
Was there any concern on your behalf when you found out the two of them were going away?
Did you think that maybe this was not the best idea?
Yeah, I was not excited about her going away with Gary. My only experience that that's not just someone telling me that came from Robyn, is that they were supposed to go on a cruise 2 months prior, and when she changed her mind not to go the way that he responded, kind of set off a little bit of a firework within my own self. So I got a little bit worried when she said she was going to leave to go to Aruba with Gary.
Now there are rumors from other women that have come forward since this whole situation with Gary, who has, in case you haven't guessed it already, became the #1 person of interest, and in fact he was a suspect at one point In the disappearance of Robyn, according to other sources, Gary had been pretty fascinated with the disappearance of then 18-year-old Natalie Holloway, who went missing in Aruba in 2005. Of course, these are just allegations, speculations. Who knows if it's true? So Robyn Gardner was not a single woman. She was in a committed relationship with a man named Richard Forrester, who also lived back in Maryland where she lived. Sources say, well, Forrester even says, that they had actually gotten into some sort of argument and they were not on the best of terms at the time that Gary invited her to go to Aruba. Now, Gardner had also just recently lost her job, so she was sort of in a slump. She wanted to go and celebrate. Apparently, she wanted to just have some fun, take some time off, and forget about the things that were happening in her life. And when Gary approached her with this trip to go overseas to the Caribbean, she was excited. Because she was in a relationship with Richard, she did end up telling him that she went on a trip with her parents. Now, I believe it was in a Facebook message. She then told him that her parents had surprised her with a trip overseas, and that's why some of the phone calls would be coming from overseas, because he could clearly see that. I don't know that they had so much conversation during the trip, but there was a point where she had sent him an email saying, "This sucks." And we'll get back to that in a little bit. Last time they were actually seen on August 2nd, 2011 was when they were at the Rum Reef Bar and Grill restaurant at Baby Beach. And it was actually when they were leaving, which was around 4 p.m. According to Gary, they were at Baby Beach, but they were at an area where some sources say was a remote area and they were going to go snorkeling. According to Robyn's closest friends, family, and even her boyfriend, Richard, they say that she was the type of woman who was kind of like more of the kind of woman that didn't like to get into the water. She sort of liked to dress up for the beach, have some makeup on. I guess she had thousands of dollars of hair extensions, and she wasn't the type of girl to get in the water, to go scuba diving. That wasn't really her thing.
Everybody does know or knows she's not going to go into the water. Whether it's her hair or her makeup getting messed up, whether it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that doesn't matter.
But then again, there are sources that say that both Robyn and Gary were drinking heavily, that they seemed intoxicated when they were last at the bar drinking, and there are even some sources that say they had some sort of altercation in an elevator. But again, these are just sources, nothing to prove specifically if that is the case, if that's what happened. According to Gary, they went to go into the water, and he was sitting on, I guess he was sitting like on a towel near the water where they were at. Robyn decides to walk into the water, and she's sort of playing in the water or whatever. And then she decides to come back out of the water. As she's coming out of the water, he says that Robyn cut her foot on a rock that was on the beach. And then she was sitting there, and he says that he believes she was tired. She closed her eyes and kind of looked like she dozed off for a little bit. Well, then Gary says that she got up and was running into the water, and they both decided to go into the ocean. And he did kind of allude that the reason they were a little bit further from the general public was because they wanted some time alone. Now, we're all adults here, at least some of us are all adults here, and it wouldn't be out of the norm for a couple, especially if they're on a romantic getaway, because let's be real, Aruba, the Caribbean, that's kind of a place I would think you would go to with your lover. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's your boyfriend or not to be whatever, but your hot piece on the side. It seems as though they were out there to enjoy each other, and possibly they were away from the general public and at a more desolate part of the ocean, so maybe they could get it on and get a little freaky, frisky, who knows. It's kind of what I'm thinking when he says that they were a little bit alone, further away from where the general public was in the water, because water can be sexy, I guess. So then Gary says was actually in the water with his shoes on. He says he wasn't thinking, probably because he was drinking. He followed her into the water. He remembered he had his shoes on, and they both realized that the current was getting sort of strong, and he said, I needed to get out of there and get out of the water. And he just assumed that Robyn was following behind him.
Yes, we both entered the water. And as I mentioned, I think in the last interview and several different interrogations, that at some point I became distressed, found out that I had a problem coming back to shore, and Robyn was, I thought, behind me.
And she wasn't. And I turned, did not see her, and I went for help.
Now, once he was out of the water and he turned around and realized that Robyn was not there, he realized that if he were to get back into the water, because of the conditions of the water, according to him. Now, we'll go back to the actual conditions of the water that day, according to other sources. But according to him, they were so bad, he was terrified that if he went back into the water to try and save her, that he would drown. So then there is surveillance footage of him, which about 2 hours after they were last seen leaving the Rum Reef Bar and Grill at Baby Beach. So about 2 hours later, you can see him walking around with no shirt on, looking for Robyn, looking for help. And I don't know that this has ever been addressed, but they're all saying, sources all say that his toupee was intact. That's something that all of these sources say. He was walking around with no shirt on, but his toupee was intact. And even one interviewer asked him and said, if you just got out of the water and it was such an extreme thing, why weren't you out of breath? Why weren't you screaming for help? Like, if a lot of people think that if they had a loved one or a companion, if you will, in the water, possibly drowning, one would actually start running around and screaming, help, help, fire. You know, they always say fire because that gets people's attention more than anything. Even if you're being raped or something, scream fire. He seemed to some sort of a little bit more calm, a little bit less panicked than one would actually think if there truly was someone that they were with drowning in the water, possibly. And they all are also people that say he was actually seen, that they were never actually seen on in the beach and at the water. Some sources say that he was actually seen in a vehicle with her, and then he was seen again later in a vehicle without her. This story it's so bizarre, you guys. It's probably bizarre because, you know, again, it's not solved, so clearly it's very bizarre. So he's walking around looking for help, and finally he sees people and he asks them to call 911 because he himself says, I wasn't sure how to get a hold of emergency. I didn't know if it was 911 in this country. Also, to keep note, it was on the day of Robyn's disappearance. She allegedly sent her boyfriend back in Maryland, who thought she was sort of on this vacation with her family, a Facebook message that said, we will sort things out. It was sort of a cryptic message. It could have meant anything. And let me just say something. Obviously, she was cheating on her boyfriend. Now, sometimes people that cheat tend to, similarly how she said she was on vacation with her family, that was a lie. She also could have said, out of guilt, we'll sort things out. I feel bad. I don't want to be here, out of guilt, because possibly she was having a really good time with this other man. She knew she had a boyfriend at home and she was essentially cheating on him, and out of guilt and maybe alcohol-ridden thoughts, she could have left those messages. A lot of people really focus on that message and think that this indicates that she was having a bad time with Gary. It very well could have meant that. It really could have meant that she realized that she made a mistake. I'm sorry, we're going to sort this out, and she would explain and complain to him when she came back to the States, or it could have very well been a message that she left because she felt guilty. I've known people that have been cheaters, and that is not an uncommon thing to do, to write something out of guilt, to say, I wish you were here, I miss you, I love you, I'm going to make this up when I get back to you. Authorities realized that she was missing. They couldn't find her. They did find the rock that had blood. Now, some sources say they matched the blood and it was Robyn's, but then it did match with the story that Gary had said, hey, she cut her foot. And some people think if Gary had killed her and somehow disposed of her body, why would he leave the bloody rock on the beach? Possibly it was an afterthought that, oh crap, maybe he hit her in the head and killed her, right? And forgot about the bloody rock on the beach and said, oh, she cut her foot and whatever. But we're going to get into the theories in a little bit. So nobody could find her. They searched and searched and searched. Some people say that she absolutely did not look like she was going to go snorkeling. They wanted to know, where is the snorkeling gear? What happened? Where did you get it from? Did you rent it from somewhere? Did you buy it? Some people say, well, it's really easy to have that sort of snorkeling gear. It's not that expensive. It's different in different countries. I guess he is a licensed scuba diver, so Possibly he thought he didn't need a professional there because he himself was. One thing that authorities did say is after they looked at all of the footage, trying to piece together the timeline of what actually happened to Robyn before her disappearance, what she was doing, what was happening, they did say it was very difficult to identify Gary on the CCTV footage because they say that he changed his toupee often. I don't know why they keep bringing up this toupee situation, but I don't really know much about toupees. I don't know if they're easy to come off. I don't know if they're like hair extensions. If somebody knows, maybe you can let me know down below. But I don't know that the toupee thing is that important because she had hair extensions. It's not uncommon for people to alter their hair. So Gary was actually the person who is seen, you can see on the footage, looking for Robyn. Like I said, a lot of people say that he doesn't seem to be in any haste. He has no haste. He sort of just seems to be walking around. Now, his defense is he was exhausted because he himself had just gotten out of the water. He had a fight to get out of the water.
I'll tell you why, because I just came out, I fought for my life to get back. I'm exhausted. I'm completely exhausted. My heart's pounding out of my chest, exhausted. It's not going to do her or me any good to jump back in that water.
But then when I ask you about it,
I was completely exhausted.
You get defensive about it. I don't understand why.
I'll explain it again for the same way again.
This surveillance video obtained by ABC News shows Giordano walking, not running, something investigators have deemed suspicious for a man who just lost his companion.
According to sources that day, the water was clear and smooth. And also, he said that he was wet. One woman who interviewed him said, well, you are dry in this footage. How is it that you're dry if you just got out of the water? And he said, I'm dry. How am I dry? I'm not dry. How can you tell that I'm dry here? Allegedly, there was CCTV footage released that showed missing Gardner having a violent fight with Giordano hours before her disappearance. I cannot find that footage anywhere, and I can find pretty much every other footage. So if that's true, I couldn't actually tell you. And does that indicate someone murdered someone? No. After all of this happened and they couldn't find a Robyn anywhere. So just so you know, the people that looked for her, they had cadaver dogs, which came up with nothing. Cadaver dogs are dogs that are trained to seek out dead bodies. They had helicopters, they had police, they had searchers all over the island looking for Robyn, and to no avail. So there was a ton of search parties for a ton of days and nobody could find her anywhere. There was absolutely no sign of her anywhere, but the thing is, they did end up finding a pink t-shirt and I believe sandals, which they could not identify whether or not they belonged to Robyn, which seems kind of weird to me, but I do believe she was wearing a dress when she went missing. Radani waited for Robyn's mother, who showed up. When she realized that her daughter was missing in Aruba, her mother showed up, and I believe it was also her sister or someone like that. According to Gary himself, he says that when Robyn's mother showed up, she said, go home. He has 2 sons at home. Go home to your family. I'm here now. I'm going to start looking for her. You've already looked for her. Clearly, there's nothing more that you can do. Her family's here. So he said he got his stuff, and on August 5th, he went to the airport. He went to check in with his ticket. He already had a ticket that he bought and paid. When he was at the ticketing counter, the woman said, is your companion with you? And all he said was, she's not. And he answered that the reason he didn't sit there and explain, well, she's missing, I'm really worried about her, blah, 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 was because he said, she's a ticketing lady. I didn't want to sit there and get into this long conversation. And he said that at the time there was a sooner flight available for his flight that he already paid for. So he said, I decided to take that flight. It was getting ready to leave. He said, I could hear the flight number getting called. So yes, I was running through security because my flight was getting ready to leave and I wanted to board it. So he says, as he's going through security, police came and subsequently arrested him in connection to the murder of Robyn Gardner. So let's get into what police suspected initially. So the police actually really believed that Gary was the person who was guilty of murdering Robyn. They thought that his story was suspicious. They thought it was super suspicious that, according to sources, they had this fight. According to some of the people at the restaurant they had been at, it seemed that she was upset. It did seem that they were drunk. Again, people said that they didn't see them snorkeling, and the place that they were at was in a very secluded part of the resort. Now, Gary says this is only 100 yards away, but then if you think about it, I do believe 100 yards is sort of like a football field. I have gone on vacation with people before, and it is not uncommon to try and get out of the view to go and enjoy each other a little bit, if you will, in the water. So I don't automatically think, oh my God, you know, this guy's guilty. So then you hear about the life insurance policy. Before their trip, Gary decided to get an insurance policy on Robyn, and he happened to be the #1 beneficiary. Now, he says that this insurance was your random travel insurance. He said, I've gotten this travel insurance before, and when you get it, he said, I get it for myself. I have a very expensive house at home with 2 boys that I want to make sure that they're okay if anything happens to me and I were to die on this trip. They would be taken care of. He said he got health insurance if you get sick, also insurance on if you want to return your ticket, something like that. And he said Robyn was included because he said she was with him if anything happened to her on the trip. He wanted to make sure that she was also covered. Now, he said they said, well, why would you get such a large insurance policy on someone you're not even married to, you're not even necessarily in a relationship with? And he said, I had already clicked all of those boxes. He said, I couldn't very well just uncheck one box for Robyn. Now, no one has really disputed this. They did say that another suspicious thing was literally the next day after she went missing, he called to inquire about this insurance he had on her, which was for a whopping $1.5 million. His response to that is, let me let him tell it to you, actually.
Well, if you go to the website, it's still live. You can go, anybody can go on there. And I've purchased it many times before. It's cancellation insurance, it's travel insurance, and the first thing is cancellation insurance. And when you click that button, you have to enter the names. But then when you go further down and click the medical and the emergency dental and the accident insurance, when you select those, if I put 3 names up there, all 3 are covered. You can't unselect anybody. So I have children. If I go traveling and I disappear, I want them to be covered, okay? So I maxed that on everything. Medical, I think, was $150,000 or whatever. But that's automatic. I can't unselect Robyn.
She's missing, and 2 days later, you're inquiring about. You're not trying to collect, but you're inquiring. Why would you do that? And she's still missing.
My lawyer, at the time,
Michael Lopez, okay, he told me, he said, you need to call insurance immediately because these helicopters and scuba divers that were going to go in the water, which they didn't go in.
he said they might send you an invoice.
He had a significant conflict of interest. What he ended up doing was, not only was he seeing dollar signs by the insurance, he is a personal injury lawyer.
One more important piece. There is a Holland handbook for travelers.
It tells you what to do in case of a missing person. The first thing it says is call authorities. The second thing it says is call your insurance company.
So the fact that he says his attorney at the time is the one that suggested he call the insurance company and collect, who also happened to be a personal injury attorney who was looking to collect about 1/3 of that. I can honestly say, if your attorney suggests you do something, typically you do it, even if it's bad advice, even if it's taking a plea for something you didn't do. So people do make mistakes by listening to their attorneys, who they're supposed to trust, who are supposed to know the law of the land, and that land happened to be Aruba. There was this book, and it was a travel companion guide, and the thing that it said was to first call authorities. I believe it said maybe call your attorney, and then call your insurance. And so he said he was simply following what was told to him by other people because he was in a strange place, in a strange land, and something very bad had happened to his companion. So some of the theories that obviously people have about what happened to Robyn do include Gary. A lot of people think that he lured her there, and there are, like I said, there were other women who have came out and said that he had invited them on other trips to Aruba. One woman said that he invited her daughter to Aruba, who happened to be, I know she was under the age of 18 at the time, is what the woman alludes, and offered her a ton of money if she would sleep with him, and even more money, in fact, that they would be okay for the rest of their lives if he would sleep with the mom and also the daughter. And the mom was absolutely disgusted by this, said, no, you're gross, and then he allegedly went off on her, was very crude and rude. There have been a lot of women that have reported that he wanted to be physically abusive to them during sex. There is allegedly a camera that came out that had very beyond pornographic images of Robyn in sexual situations that her boyfriend says she would never do again. Sometimes when people are in situations where they are cheating, I have heard that people will be a little bit different than they are with their normal spouses. I don't know this to be true, but I have heard this. I've seen this in movies, on shows, Friends, and not the TV show, but Friends have said they just kind of, there's this thing about cheating on somebody and you just act like the person that you always want to be in bed, but you don't do it with your regular spouse because I don't know. That's one thing. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a murderer. I mean, Robyn was a willing participant. These were not photos taken of her after she was, hopefully she's still alive, but these are not photos of her passed out or anything like that. I've not seen the photos, so I couldn't actually tell you. So there are a lot of women, and apparently there are actually records of him being physically abusive. Again, just because that is the case, it doesn't mean that he's a murderer. It may seem like I'm sticking up for him, which I'm absolutely not. I couldn't actually tell you what I think happened to her. Some theories think that she was a victim of human trafficking. One point is that one of the biggest ways Aruba makes money is allegedly human trafficking. And there is reports that some people think that what happened to Natalie Holloway is what happened to Robyn Gardner. Now, we still don't know what happened to Natalie Holloway, but she did go missing in 2005, and some sources think that she was put into, there are some theories that think she was put into human trafficking if she is not deceased. There's that theory. There's also the theory that she cut her foot on the rock, and after she went back into the water, as Gary described, she cut her foot on the rock the first time she came out, then they both went back into the water. He followed her in. Some sources say that they actually saw a shark that day, and her having blood on her foot could have made a shark come toward her. People say that blood will instantly get a shark's attention, and possibly she drowned, and the reason they didn't find her remains is because she was eaten by a shark. Some sources say, though, that there were not sharks that day and that the water was completely still. There aren't really any theories that she took off and just wanted to have a new life or suicide. Those are definitely not really likely because she was out on vacation. She not only had a ton of family and friends at home waiting for her, but she did also have a boyfriend, and she was on this trip with this guy that apparently she did really like. So the idea that she committed suicide or wanted to disappear and start a new life doesn't seem very likely whatsoever in this case. In some missing people cases, I absolutely think that could be a possibility. In fact, I am working on the Maura Murray disappearance, which is crazy. That case is a roller coaster, and I have actually just watched the entire Oxygen series on it. I didn't want to cover that until I saw that, and I will say that I do feel like there's a ton of new theories in that series, so I didn't want to cover it till then, so I will be covering that in the next couple of weeks. I do want to say that since Robyn's disappearance, 2 other Americans, including an NBA star, have drowned in that same location where Robyn went missing. Now, that doesn't mean she did drown, but let's put some heavy maybes on if that was a possibility. So Gary Giordani did spend a whopping 116 days in prison in Aruba before they did release him because they had insufficient evidence to prove that he murdered Robyn Gardner. They actually never brought official murder charges to him. They just held him, and I do believe that Aruba in itself has had a ton of scrutiny. I will say that a lot of people suspect that Aruba was a lot more strict on Gary because of the former disappearance of Natalie Holloway and how they treated that situation. So there's been a ton of scrutiny on them, especially for another missing American woman in their country, basically right under their nose. Now, what's funny is, maybe not so funny, but what's interesting about who Gary's attorney happens to be, his American attorney, because he actually did have an attorney, Chris Lawatz, who, just by the way, just so you know, Gary is a millionaire. So this is a man that has money, he has means, and he did hire what he thinks to be the best. Now, his attorney, his American attorney who was brought on to assist in this case against him, is a very famous attorney. His name is Jose Baez. Now, Jose Baez is very famous for representing not just Casey Anthony, but also Aaron Hernandez. Now, we all are very familiar with the tragic case of Casey Anthony and her missing daughter, who was later found, Kaylee Anthony, deceased, buried in a trash bag, which is an incredibly tragic story. And Casey Anthony did actually get out of prison, so she was found not guilty of murdering her daughter Kaylee. Aaron Hernandez was actually an American football player for the New England Patriots who was accused of murdering Odin Lloyd. And Aaron actually ended up committing suicide in his prison cell, which is pretty sad, on April 19th of this last year, 2017. Jose Baez is actually the attorney that you will see in several of the interviews that Gary gave after he came back from Aruba after being incarcerated for 116 days. Now, it is said that Gary has since filed a lawsuit for $3.5 million to the company that was supposed to give out the life insurance policy. Some people have mixed feelings about Gary because they have grilled him and drilled him so many times. They said he's told his story about 16 different times, and each time his story is consistent, except for each time he tells a story, he may or may not remember another detail. Now, if you guys don't know, one way to find out if someone is telling the truth is the way they tell a story. Now, okay, so let me just give you an example. So if somebody says, "Hey Amber, what did you do today?" And I say, "Well, today I went shopping, I went to the mall, I went shopping, I had lunch and had pizza. I had pizza for lunch." And then someone again says, "Oh wait, what did you do today, Amber?" And then I say the exact same story, like exactly verbatim. Like, I went shopping, I went to the mall, I had lunch, oh yeah, I had pizza for lunch. That kind of seems like it is scripted, right? It's too exact. Instead, I would say, "Oh, well, you know, I went to the mall and it actually happened to be Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall." I'm just thinking, I don't know why, that's an Arizona mall. And I had pizza at Peter Piper Pizza because it's awesome. And oh yeah, when I was at the mall, I got some makeup from MAC. So it's the same story, but as I'm telling it, I'm having more memories. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, you know, I did this." And then if I'm asked again, "Hey Amber, what did you do today?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, so I went to the mall, I wanted to look for some new clothes. And while I was shopping, I got makeup, I went to MAC, but I also went to Sephora because they have, blah, blah, blah. And then I was hungry, I was going to get sushi, but it was too long of a line or too long of a wait, so then I decided to have pizza." So then it's like the same story, but there's added details. And it's just something that happens to your brain when you're recalling an event that actually happened. And also, people say, and don't always quote this, and don't try to, it's a little bit difficult when you're not in front of the person, like sitting there, because when you're in person, you can see someone's side. Sometimes when someone uploads a YouTube video or when they're on TV, their camera doesn't always do a mirror thing, so sometimes it'll flip the image. So like, this is my right hand, so I'm telling you this, like this is the hand I write with, but sometimes it's hard to distinguish what that is when you're looking at someone on camera. And so you kind of want to look in the background, like say there's a map or there's words. You can typically tell what's left to right based off of if the image looks like a mirror image or if it looks backwards. So there's that. But I believe, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I do believe when someone is having a memory, I think they look to the right. Am I wrong? I don't know. There's actually this channel I started watching called Reagan, and she studies body language, and it's fascinating. But anyway, so a lot of people do say that, well, Gary is arrogant, and he's this millionaire, he's this business guy who, allegedly has, some sordid history, and a lot of these women are coming out and, saying that he was sort of mean and abusive, and I'm not saying that he's innocent. You guys, if you think that I'm saying that, please don't. I honestly couldn't. This is one of those cases I'm having a really difficult time figuring out. Usually I have an idea. But based off of the situation, they were on a getaway together, I do understand that it's weird that he bought that life insurance policy. But if you think about it, he is a man that has a lot of money. And there are some things that different people do that have a lot of different people of different socioeconomic classes do. When I get a rental car, they say, do you want the insurance? I should say yes, but you save a couple dollars if you don't get it. Although it could be bad in the long run if you end up crashing the car, but you know what I'm saying. But someone that has a ton of money and they have a ton of money because they're very smart with money, typically they go that extra mile, they get that extra insurance, whatever it may be. And he could have just been in such a habit, like he gets insurance for his kids or whoever he goes with, that it was just second nature for him to also get that insurance for her in the event that something happens. Does it look suspicious that he called the next day? Absolutely it does. But then again, what if this truly, I mean, that's what it's for, right? The insurance is in case something bad happens. I don't know. Everyone reacts differently in times of grief and panic. And it's sort of like the Logan Paul situation when he saw a dead body and he was kind of laughing and reacting. Do I think that he was actually trying to make fun of this poor soul that was so sad they took their own life? I want to say no. I don't know Logan, obviously. But I can tell you that people act a lot different in times of grief, in times of absolute despair, shock. I can tell you when I was a kid, and even sometimes if someone's like yelling at me, screaming in my face, sometimes I'll laugh. Like I used to be in school and I would just start laughing if I, even if I was in trouble. And it's just like a reaction I had. I didn't think it was funny, but it kind of was just like shock, So could Gary have possibly been in shock and sort of like, oh my God, what the hell? Like, oh my God, what is going on? All these things going through his head, like, holy shit, I was the last person to be seen with her. I'm going to be accused. There's that aspect of it too, because I can tell you one time I went to Las Vegas with somebody and we were in a hotel room, and that was the first time I had a seizure. And this was one of the first times we went out. Like I had gone out with this person a couple of times, but this is one of the first times we went out. This is when I lived in Arizona. And so we went out of the state. And it was the first time I had ever had a seizure in my life. And I remember that day like no other. And after I was okay, and I went to the ER and everything, the person was like, after it was kind of something we not necessarily could laugh about, but something we could reflect upon and maybe laugh about. I don't know. It's scary. It's still scary to me because I've had 2 seizures since then. But they were like, oh my God, I was thinking in my head, holy shit, I'm in this hotel in Las Vegas with this girl. They're going to think I killed her. And I guess there's a lot of things that go through people's mind in that situation. I would have been freaking out and been like, hey, I hope she's okay. But I guess that too was going through his head. So all I'm trying to say is someone's reaction to a situation doesn't necessarily indicate guilt, but it can, but it also can. So it's just a catch-22, I think. It's a really sad situation. So if any of you guys happen to know this woman, possibly, maybe she hit her head and has amnesia and doesn't know who she is. I don't know. But if you guys know anything, I will leave all of the information down below in the description box. If you guys have any tips, I would love to know your guys' theories. I'm also very curious as to why this case isn't as widely spread as, say, Natalie Holloway, because it is another woman who went missing in Aruba. And, those cases tend to get a lot of attention. I hadn't heard about this case until one of you guys suggested it to me, and I looked into it, and I was absolutely fascinated that I had not heard about her. And, Robyn Gardner is someone that is very missed by her family, and I would love for her family to get closure. And if Gary did truly have nothing to do with her disappearance, then I'm sure him and his family would love also for closure and for his name to be cleared, because I can't imagine walking around being accused of something you didn't do. I can't imagine what it'd feel like to be accused of murder if you didn't do it. And I'm sure it's a really shitty feeling. And if you did do it, then that's a different story. That's a completely different story. And he deserves punishment. So there is an update to this case as of October 19th, 2017, so just last year. It says Robyn Gardner's sister to have human bone found in Aruba, DNA tested. So do you guys remember that recently there was all of this speculation that there had been some human remains found in Aruba, and a lot of people believed it was to be Natalie Holloway's remains, and as it turns out, they were not Natalie Holloway's bones. So scientists will soon will be able to compare DNA extracted from a human bone found during an investigation into the disappearance of Alabama teen Natalie Holloway to missing Maryland native Robyn Gardner. I'm going to submit my DNA in the next few days to see if there is a match, Gardner's sister Danielle Colson Unglesby told the Huffington Post. Human bone was found during the filming of the TV series on Oxygen Network called The Disappearance of Natalie Holloway. The show followed the missing teen's father and private investigator TJ Ward while they chased the leads in Aruba. Later this month, it was discovered that it was unfortunately not Natalie Holloway's. It's a single individual whom we believe is Caucasian European ethnicity. Jason Kolowaski, a former forensic laboratory director of the DC Department of Forensic Scientists, told the Huffington Post. So Gardner is one of at least 4 Americans who have gone missing in the Caribbean island in recent years. People have long drawn comparisons between the cases of Gardner and Holloway. Neither woman's body has been found and no arrests have been made in the connection with their disappearance. So Giordani was arrested, but he was not charged. He was released. He was initially held in Aruba, later released due to lack of evidence. The bone found during the filming of The Disappearance of Natalie Holloway was discovered by Gabrielle Madrigal, an informant, and John Ludwig, a friend of Vandersloot, according to the TV series. So a report surfaced in October 2011 in an article of the National Enquirer, which claimed authorities received an anonymous but credible phone tip that Robyn was actually buried in a dog's grave. If the remains do come back and they are linked to Robyn Gardner, and they were in the hands, I guarantee the FBI will snatch them up in the hands of Ludwig and Madrigal. So that is interesting. Robyn Gardner's sister is hoping it will ultimately lead to answers in her sister's case. Yeah, so I've looked online and I can't seem to find anywhere if the results have actually came back as to whether or not they do belong to Robyn. But if they do belong to Robyn, then that's probably going to raise even more questions to the people that discovered them. And possibly, is there a connection between Natalie Holloway's disappearance and Robyn? Thank you guys so much for watching another video. I'm sorry it didn't go up on Friday like I said, but this was a pretty lengthy video and I wanted to get as many details in as possible. And you know, as long as I post twice a week, I'm happy. But I do have another video coming for you guys on Monday, so definitely come back for that. I love you guys. Happy New Year again. Please remember to always be kind to yourself and others. And I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be Monday. I'm hoping to have another video up on either Saturday or Sunday. Oops, today is Saturday. I'm so dumb. Anyways, I love you guys so much. Please remember to always be kind to yourself and others, and also let me know in the comments down below if there are any cases that you would like me to cover. I have a huge list and I get case names every single day, so I appreciate that. I add it to a list. You guys, I am definitely going to cover as many as I can while I'm still doing this. So I love you guys, and I will see you later. Mwah.